Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. We got a great show for you today. Going to be talking a little bit about my origins as the Bass Chaplain. And as always, if you hadn't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. It really helps us out. Click the bell notifications and you will get notifications of whenever our podcast drops. Today, I'm going to be talking to a guy that you're going to know. He's a former classic champion. Alton Jones from Texas is going to be here today. Alton was instrumental in me coming to be the chaplain for the Bassmaster Elite Series. He, along with several others, Edwin Evers, Randy Howell, and a lot of other guys, got together and asked me to be the chaplain way back in the day. I guess that was 2008. So I'm sure we'll get to talk about that. But Bassmaster Classic champion, Major League Fishing star, Alton Jones. You don't want to miss it. Coming up next on the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. I have all the way from the great state of Texas, Alton Jones. Welcome, Alton. We're glad you're here, man.
Hi, Chris. I'm delighted to be here with you, too.
Man, we've tried to do this for a long time, and we've been missing each other, but finally got together. And I felt like I needed to have you on my first podcast. I mean, if it wasn't for a day on the water with you, I wouldn't be here right now. So I'm eternally grateful. I really am. So,
well, I'll never forget that day myself. That was one for the record books. You know, it was our final day of practice on Lake Hartwell.
Yeah.
For the 2008 Classic, and that's the day that that we figured out. I figured out the winning formula for the Classic, and it's just like a light went off. But I'll never forget having you in my boat that day, and our discussions and. We'd known each other for a long time before that, but I think that kind of started just a whole new phase in our relationship. And
it really was. And I didn't help you do a thing. I sat back in the back deck and ate sandwiches all day and just watched you fish. And I remember you came in and you said, "Hey, look, don't tell anybody that we figured it out. That we figured out the winning pattern today." You figured all that out. I didn't figure out anything. So. Man,
you say you didn't do anything to help me. You prayed for me. So
I did pray for you.
According to just prayer account is assistance.
Yeah, that's what we'll have to clarify.
It's definitely assistance. I get help from God in every tournament I fish, whether I catch them or not.
Right.
So I guess I'm always looking for divine assistance and prayer support.
We all are. And that day you said, "Hey, we're thinking about getting a chaplain. Your name keeps coming up. Would you be interested in being the chaplain?" I tried to look very spiritual. I kind of bowed my head and said, "Well, let me pray about that for 2 seconds. Yes, I'd love to be a chaplain for the Bassmaster Tour." So that was pretty cool. So tell us about your fishing journey, man. How did you get to be a professional fisherman? Tell us how that went.
Well, my grandfather bought me a subscription to Bassmaster magazine back when I was like 7 years old, so like 1970, maybe even 6 years old, 69. I have an old boat in East Texas that my dad bought me when I was like 10 years old, and it still has the Bass member sticker since, and I can't remember what the year is, but it's like 74 or something on it. Back then it gave you like $1,000 boat theft insurance, or now that wouldn't even really cover your graphs.
That's right.
Wouldn't even cover one graph.
That's right. Yeah, three rods, and that's it. That would be it. So that would be
exactly. But so I guess the point of me saying that was that being a professional fisherman was kind of a childhood dream. Fishing was always my passion. I grew up fishing in deep East Texas with my grandfather on some private lakes. From the time I was old enough to walk, literally, he was more of a bluegill and crappie fisherman. He loved to catch crappie. He called it white perch. So I spent a lot of time with a cane pole and a bucket of minnows. But when I started reading about these guys that were catching bass and would get paid for it, I thought, man, isn't that cool? Wouldn't that be really neat to be able to do that? And back then, especially, probably even today, but back then, when you tell somebody that or tell your parents, for example, that, hey, when I grow up, I want to be a professional bass fisherman. That's kind of like telling somebody I want to play in the NFL or I want to be a, an Olympic skier, and like, okay, great. Nice dream, but it'll never happen. And it's fishing. And if it did happen, it just means you're going to be, broke and lazy,
Right.
and so that was kind of the perception. And so I think I spent a long time, really going along with, other people's plans for my life. I became a Christian in junior high. That's when I put my faith in Jesus Christ, and realized that I knew the gospel long before that. I knew the answers to the questions, and knew that Jesus died for people's sins. But it wasn't really until then that I realized He died for my sins, and that I was the sinner in need of saving. But anyway, the older I got, I started fishing more. When I got into college, I actually bought my first bass boat against my parents' wishes, and started fishing a lot of tournaments here locally. And just a quick aside here, I joined the Waco Bass Club. I'm trying to remember. I think it was 1984.
Yeah.
And had a partner from Baylor that fished the club with me. And I'll never forget our first tournament on Lake Belton, first bass tournament I ever fished. And we went out and we zeroed that day.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I thought, man, it's really tough fishing. And we came in and it was one of those days that everybody smashed them. I mean,
that'll hurt you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so, but I realized right then that, hey, okay, this isn't probably as easy as I thought it might be. And it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. And so it was kind of a good reset for me, fishing wise. But the dream was still alive. The problem for me was that at that point in my life, even as a Christian, I was able to focus in every area of my life except for bass fishing, and that's one area that I wasn't willing to let just take control of and yield it to Him. And I think probably the reason for that was I knew in my heart that fishing was had an inappropriate priority in my life. And I feel like, okay, if I give this part of my life to God, He's going to take it away from me. And I wasn't willing to let that happen.
Right.
So anyway, during that time, I got married. I actually started winning some tournaments locally, and then started fishing professionally. But the first three or 4 years of my pro fishing career was really banging my head up against the wall. Never qualified for a classic, never won a tournament. Was making just enough money to wasn't even making enough money to keep myself out of credit card debt. We were piling up credit card debt and different things like that. This would have been back in about the 1990 to 93 time frame. And it just came to a place where I was at the end of my rope, and I knew it was a spiritual problem. I'd known that all along, but I was, we try to hide things from God.
Right.
Like, okay. If we hide it, He won't see it. He won't know.
Right. Yeah.
And I still do that in my life with things.
Yeah.
There's still things in my life that I try to hide from God, and I've got to, I'm learning. He's teaching me to, let the light shine.
Right.
Let the light shine on my sin, and bring it to the light, and then it's in the light, and then God can work on our heart from that point.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to that particular day. At that time, it was fishing, and I'll never forget. Jimmy Sue and I one evening praying. I was at my wit's end financially. Fishing just wasn't working, and I finally said, "Okay, Lord, I understand." I said, "I'm willing to follow You, even if it means I never make another cast again." And in my heart, for the first time, I really meant that. And my expectation was that God's going to take me out of fishing and put me somewhere else, and I was willing to follow whatever that meant. But He didn't. He didn't do that. Instead he began to take the passion that He had given me for fishing and begin to build it as a platform. So looking back over a 32-year professional fishing career now, I think I just finished my 32nd season.
Wow! Congratulations! Wow!
Possible. But looking back over when you see success in Alton Jones's fishing career, I don't want anybody to mistake that for something Alton Jones did. I mean, that's God had anything that has happened positive has been just what God's done to help me build a platform. And the message isn't, hey, trust your fishing to God and you're going to start winning tournaments. That's not the message at all. The message is you're never going to find what the true happiness, true joy, true peace in your life, true abundance in your life, and unless you're following Christ, whatever that means. I mean, that's
good.
That's the message of that. You don't have to be a professional fisherman to be happy. It could be, wherever God has you.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how that's the long version of how I got into it.
Well, you nailed both issues there, and I want to take, I know your dad was a big influence in your life, and I actually quoted your dad yesterday.
Oh, really?
I went to the hospital to visit a friend that had surgery, and I was about to get on the escalator, and I remembered your dad. Your dad said, "Chris, if you want to lose weight, you need to stay away from escalators, elevators, and refrigerators." That's what he told me, and so that is the quote from your dad that has affected my life and has helped me out tremendously. So I took the stairs instead.
Well, good.
That was good.
I'll share that with him. He'll get tickled.
Yeah, that's what he told me.
My dad has lots of quotes like that. I mean, he has tons of those, and I'm amazed at how many people and everybody remembers different ones. But that's how dads are. My parents have left a great legacy for me. The most important one is spiritual. When they know God's word and they follow God's word.
Right. Yeah.
And they've put a pretty high bar for me and Jimmy Sue. Both my parents are still living. They're in their 90s and been married for 70.
Wow.
3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, amazing.
Unbelievable. You please tell him that I remember that quote. I said that yesterday in my mind. I said, "Yep, yeah,
we'll do.
Refrigerators." I remember that. So,
yeah.
Well, you're, speaking of legacies, you got a legacy going on yourself there. Alton Jr. Well, I knew that Alton was a hammer way back. He and I fished one time in the little area at Kentucky Lake where there's off limits, that little deal out there. And we were going along fishing, and he was just, there's one. He was just catching them right and left. And I was like trying to make a cast, going, what is this kid doing? Good night.
That's probably when he was like 12 years old.
Yeah. He was really young then and fishing right there. But man, he's really, really come a long way and really doing fantastic. I know you got to be proud of him,
Yeah, I am. And I of course, I'm proud of his fishing. It's fun to see his success in the sport, but he's making some good decisions with his life right now. He's following the Lord. And that's the thing I'm most pleased with. I don't want to say I could care less about the fishing, but I wouldn't really care where he was in life, what his career was. That's the thing for all of us. We just want to be where God needs us and where God wants us. And, it's a never ending struggle to stay in that place. It really is.
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested in the Bass Force because I need to download the app and get some information even this weekend. I need to do. Tell us how the Bass Force app came about, man. I remember you saying, "Hey, we got an app coming out. You need to check it out." A long time ago. But tell us how that happened.
Yeah, well, I've had the idea for like 15 years in my mind about. So back when I was starting professional fishing, something people don't know, I had a computer store here in Waco, Texas for about 4 years. And so I've always been a tech guy and a gadget guy. But when the iPhone came out and I started seeing apps about different things, the one thing that was really missing was something where you could really get information from the pros on what lure to tie on. When I would go to boat shows and different public appearances, the number one question that I was asked by fishing fans is, "Hey, I've got a tournament on such and such lake this weekend, and what do I need to tie on for that tournament? It's going to be raining and the wind's going to be blowing it, whatever.
Right.
What do I need to use?" And I would get that question over and over and over again around the country. So I got together with 8 other pros, and we decided to come up with an app where you go in and you take it and you enter the conditions of your fishing day. and you can find out what Skeet Reese and Gerald Swindle and Brandon Palaniuk and Jason Christie and Kevin Van Dam and Alton Jones recommend you fish with.
Wow.
Under those conditions. And it works on any lake. It works on any river. You just put your conditions in, and it lets you build a game plan. You know, a game plan is really just all it is here's the list of things I want to try and the order I want to try them in. Sideline to that, it is also okay, the weather said it's going to be sunny, but what if it rains instead? Or the weather said it's going to be windy, but what if it slicks off? So a game plan is just planning for all those contingencies, so that when you're on the lake and something takes you by surprise, you don't have to just put on your thinking cap and sit down for a few minutes and go through your tackle box and not have a clue of what you're going to do. A game plan allows you to have those decisions made ahead of time, and they save you invaluable time and really put a process to the fishing aspect. This past season, you know, I actually had the second best season of my 32-year career in 2022. Finished third in Angler of the Year. It was a great year. Made the top 10 in 5 out of 7 events. And one of the reasons is because I actually started taking Bass Force and actually building myself game plans and planning for all those contingencies ahead of each event. And it took the thought process out of my head. Well, I went through the process, but it forced me to do it ahead of time. And so literally all I'd have to do is when I needed to make an adjustment was look at my phone. And instead of forgetting something I thought about 2 weeks ago, there it was right there in front of me. Oh yeah, I need to try this. I need to try this. I need to try this. And in my progression, I'm much more efficient. Has a lot of really cool features. You can build your games, and then of course there's a premium version that's like $1.99 a month. You know, that gives you a little bit more. But anyway, that's what Bass Force is and does, and it, you know, it's growing. We're adding new features all the time. We've got all kinds of stuff coming.
How cool is that? I mean, how many times have guys been on the water and they said, "Man, I wish I could call up a pro right now and ask them, you know, what they would do." And now you can get it right there. So that's an awesome deal. I'm going to take you back a few years. I remember reading in Bassmaster magazine, one of the first times I ever read about you, and you were, I think it was Old Hickory, and you were running to the back of somewhere and you like knocked your lower unit off or something like that. You remember that? You remember that?
Absolutely. Do I remember it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to tell the story?
Yeah. Tell that story. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This was my first top 5 finish ever in a pro event, in a major event. And we were at Old Hickory, and they had a fall drawdown. And I think it's the tournament that Denny Brower's son, the name slips me. Chad Brower. Chad Brower won that tournament. But anyway, I had patterned the fish in the backs of creeks and pockets on a jig, and it was a pretty solid bite. But as time went by through practice, I saw other guys were figuring out the same thing, and I knew it was going to get crowded. There wasn't the back ends of that many pockets to fish. And there was just one big creek that you couldn't get back in because of the drawdown. It was all silted over. But when I'd pull my boat up there, I could see the water turn green again. It looked like it got deep. And if it did, there would be a big area to fish that nobody was going to. So I got my boat up on pad, and I thought, you know, if I go 70, I could probably jump this little sandbar. And now it wasn't a sandbar sticking out of the water. It was a sandbar where the water was like an inch deep for 100 yards. And I got running, and I got into the sandbar. My boat started slowing down 70, 60, 50, 40. And right at that time, I found a laydown that was buried in the silt.
Oh, no.
Yeah, bang. And it was so shallow, I'll never forget. My boat's coming in like this, bang. And it hits the sand, and it just tilts on its side like that. So shallow, it wouldn't even float.
Wow.
And so I waited that flat while I was up there. Yeah. And I found that log that I hit. And I found like half of my prop that was not too far away from that log. But I also found that if I had gone about 10 yards to the south of that, the water, instead of being that deep, was about that deep. And wow. I found a little path I could go through high speed. So I pushed, pulled tugs, and shoved my boat off that sandbar, found a competitor to tow me back to to the ramp and had the service crew replace my lower unit, and thought, I'm going to try that again. But this time I took my path, 10 yards to the south, and sure enough, I made it in there and had an area to fish all to myself. And I actually tell that story a lot in different times when I'm speaking to men's groups or whatever. My point of that is, as fishermen, we have to learn to fish where the fish are. And that's the most important thing. That's more important than being a good caster or picking the right bait or anything else. You can do all the other things right, and if you're not where the fish are, you're not going to catch anything. But if we learn to fish where the fish are, we can even do things wrong and have some success. And my point that I like to make to people, that the same thing is true in life. God has put us here. Jesus says that, come follow me and I will make you become fishers of men. And, we need to know where the fish are. We need to be just as intentional about being around the fish in our lives as we are when we're out on the water fishing. God, I fully believe, has given each one of us a very specific sphere of influence. Okay. Yeah. There's people who will listen to you who won't listen to me. Right. There's people who listen to me who won't listen to you. That's right. And there's fish that God has put in my life. And quite frankly, some of the fish in my life, I wish God would put them in your life instead of mine, because some of them are pain, but He hasn't. And, I don't believe in accidents. I believe every person we're around, every person we meet is a divine appointment. Right. And so I use that story as much as anything to remind myself that I need to be intentional about looking for those fish in my life and realizing that Jesus Christ has them in my life for a much bigger reason than just fishing, but to be an example, an ambassador for Jesus Christ to them, to share the gospel with them, to live out. What does it look like to live in front of the fish in my life as a Christian? And how can I show them through my life the power of God? And when I'm going through really difficult circumstances, can they see peace and joy in my life? So anyway,
that's good. That was a good word. We didn't plan that. I didn't segue into that. That was good, man. That was good stuff. So I appreciate that. Well, let me tell you. So end us up here with a couple of tips. You're you're known as very versatile. You won the classic fishing jigs deep, but you're a pretty good sight fisherman. You like to sight fish, and you kind of known. Give us some tips, man. I need to it'll be coming up soon here, and about the first full moon in March at Santee, they'll start kind of moving in, and I'm gonna need some tips. So what would you tell us? And I'll be looking on the Bass Force app, but we want to, what's some things you tell us to get better?
Well, you're right. I do love to sight fish. And so we're going, our first tournament's down at Toho, Kissimmee Chain. Yeah. And, they might be spawning there. It just depends on what the weather is the week we're there. Right. But in practice, that's the first thing I'm going to do. If I can look at them, I'm going to choose to fish that way. And, so here's one tip that I think a lot of people really overlook. And to you hunters, it'll make sense. But to fishermen, maybe you've never thought about it this way, but never cast at a bass that's looking at you. Okay. Yeah. That's the problem with sight fishing. When you can see a bass, the problem is he can see you as well. Okay. And when he's looking at me and I make that cast, he automatically associates that lure with me and makes my chance of getting him to strike that lure less. So I'm always going to wait until he chases a bluegill away or until he just turns his back the other direction or whatever before I make that cast. And you'll be surprised if you just incorporate that one little thing right there. Wow. A higher percentage of your fish you're going to catch on that first throw.
That's a great tip. I love that. I've never heard that, and I appreciate that. That's some good stuff, man. That's why that's why you ask the pros, and that's why you download the best fan. Well, man, I got your buddy Trey Kistler coming up hopefully in the next few weeks, and we're going to be talking to him. Love Kistler rods and all they do there as well. You've been with Kistler for a long time. And
yeah, 20 years.
20 years. Wow, that's
and the older I get, the more I appreciate my Kistler rods because I need, at my age, I need stuff that's lightweight, I
know. And those are lightweight. They really are. And I know that because you gave me one once at a Bassmaster tournament. A bunch of you guys gave me a bunch of a bunch of rods, and I love that rod. That's a great rod. And so,
I've got a lot of friends that are mad at me because of Kistler rods, by the way.
really, they're
Because
mad at you.
because I let them use some of mine or whatever, and it is one of those things. It's kind of like I don't know. Well, it's just one of those things that once you try it, you don't really understand the importance of it until you use it. You don't really understand the quality of a Kistler until you put one in your hands, and then you're hooked.
Right.
And then you got to go replace every rod you got because none of your other rods feel good anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of my friends are mad at me and their wives are really mad at me because their budget's gone up because I made them go buy 20 rods.
Man, I tell you, it is a great rod. I can't wait to have him on. Well, man, I appreciate you being my guest today, and I know you got a big Major League Fishing season coming up, and we'll be excited to watch you guys. I tell you, I don't miss an episode of Major League Fishing. Love it, and can't wait. And I remember, my wife that passed away this year, I've got videos of us sitting up watching Major League Fishing together, and who she was pulling for and things like that. Wow. So it's been awesome. But man, thank you for being on with me today. I appreciate it so much.
This has been my pleasure completely, Chris. I'll look forward to the next time.
Me too. All right, everybody, this is the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. Hit the little subscribe button if you hadn't already, and we will see you next Friday at high noon.